There was a time when probably most of us, for our general work, educating or business, wherever, we didn't really touch images very much. There might have been some more specialist photographers or graphics people on the team, etc., who were involved in touching up or, making images for flyers, newsletters, that sort of thing. But I would argue that today it's probably a pretty common skill that, most of us need to use, whether it's for doing presentations, or whether it's for preparing blog images, for, headers for blog posts, that kind of thing. So the ability just to quickly use your iPad and step through creating some sort of standout images is probably a much more common skill than it once was. So obviously you've got to start with some kind of interesting image, and of course we always suggest maybe using the grid lines on your camera app, turning those on so that you can actually line up some of the things possibly in your frame. But even something as simple as, this one is actually, I don't know how you guys feel, but it probably is a little bit of a boring image at the moment. Yeah, there's a little bit of a sunset there and some clouds. You can see the workflow down the side here that I'm actually suggesting. Okay, so obviously you want to take it with your camera app. There's a range of different camera apps. I tend to just use the standard camera app, and this is on iPhone, iPad, and whatever device that you're using. I tend to just take it with the standard camera app and then start to move through a workflow like this. So here's our simple one. We've taken that image. What can we do with this one now? So just by using a free app called Snapseed, we can start to see, just by applying what's called a drama filter. And as I said, Snapseed is fantastic because it's free, and all you have to do is just swipe with your finger to make these kind of adjustments and changes. So already we're getting a bit more contrast and colour. That took, all of 20 seconds to load the photo into Snapseed, apply a filter and save it. It's starting to look a bit more interesting now. If we move on to an effects app like WowFX is an example, you can probably spot what's changed there. A little bit more of a filter. We've kind of brought out some of the colour a bit more, but just added that little bird there. And WowFX is an app which lets you add all kinds of things. We could have added lightning, we could have added clouds, all kinds of things. I just chose to add that one little bird, just for that little bit of extra drama, I guess, because we're kind of bringing out the storm as contrasted with the setting sun. So we've starting to get a little bit of a narrative in our image now, and that's just something that you can play around with WowFX. All the different range of little add-ins that you can do, just to start to support what you're wanting your image to tell to your audience. Just a little bit more of a dramatic filter there, and sometimes you might just want to go straight to Instagram if you're an Instagram user and you use some of those stock filters. They're becoming quite boring now because they've been overused so much by people. So I would recommend another app called Afterlight, which gives you a lot more control, filter options and various borders, etc., just to pull out the bits and pieces that you would really like. And then finally, and especially if you're wanting this to be, as I said, like a title image for a blog post, etc., you might want to pop into an app like Over, which lets you use a whole range of different fonts and text and easily apply that over the top of your image. This sort of idea of freedom and hope in the wings of the storm, all that kind of stuff. So we've kind of built up, like I said, a bit of a narrative, brought the colour, the contrast out a lot more. And this is a process which really would take you only a couple of minutes, possibly, once you were used to using those apps. I think Over is a couple of dollars. Afterlight, WowFX, they're all a couple of dollars, and Snapseed, as I said, is free. And for a full photo editing suite, that's not a bad price, really. As I said, compare it to doing this same kind of process on a PC, and traditionally the kind of expense and software that you would have had to have is sort of quite different. So, and with images and photography, moving from one app to the other is very simple. If you've used an iPad or iPhone, or like I said, even Android has a gallery. On the iPhone, iPad, you have the camera roll. It's inside the Photos app. And every one of these, so obviously the camera saves to the camera roll. When I open that image in Snapseed, I save it back to the camera roll. In WowFX, I open that image from the camera roll, save it back there. So each time you're just opening it from the camera roll and saving it back there. And part of the beauty of that is that every stage is also preserved. So every stage of my edits. And if I get right down to the end here and decide, actually, no, I don't like what I did in Snapseed, I can go back to the original one because all the different versions will be saved in the camera roll. So that's definitely an advantage of doing things this way. With other files, it's a little bit different, and Apple has a thing called Open In. So if you're working with Word, like text files and various other files, video is saved in camera roll as well, but other files you'll need to use what's called the Open In. I'll quickly show you a couple of other, what I call the single workflows. So if you're working with audio, I would recommend Audio Bus as an app for you to use. It actually has a built-in workflow process where you can chain a few apps together. You could be working in one app, have a beat going, switch to another app, keep that beat going but play some piano over the top, and Audio Bus will keep all those going in the background. You can then feed it down through some other apps and into GarageBand that way, and GarageBand is probably the most capable, I guess. There's others as well, but in terms of bringing all those different sounds together. So that's definitely a workflow for audio. You can use other apps as well and put them through Twisted Wave, which is an audio editor, and push it to GarageBand that way as well. So you could do some stuff in Audio Bus and then in other apps outside that and pull them together there. So that's kind of another single workflow. Another one we might talk about is sharing files. And this is where you can see us talking about this idea of using the open-in dialogue. For this, we're talking about pretty simple. You've created something already. You've typed something up, you've taken an image, you've made some audio. From those apps, you can actually store them on your iPad. And there's one that I recommend called Documents. It's that one there. It's actually a free app, which is always nice. And Documents will plug in to let you store these files locally on your iPad. It'll also plug into Dropbox, Google Drive, SkyDrive, and various other cloud services as well. So if you're like me and you use several of those services, Documents is a great one for bringing all that together. And I might have created one of those files, like I said. I can then open it in to Documents and store it there. So Documents is, in a way, bridges that gap back to the PC a little bit by giving you a central kind of storage kind of place. And from there, of course, you can open it in to share it through other places. Once you've got it in Documents or wherever you want to store it, you can then share it. So that's sort of a single workflow in terms of storing and then sharing your files. Let's move over to talking about a multitask workflow now. Instead of those single workflows, once you've kind of mastered that idea of, okay, for our photos, we're going to chain these few things together and end up with our final product, it might be that there's actually a higher project you want to work on. Maybe you want a series of images and text and video packaged together for publishing. And that's what I tend to call this multi-workflow idea. So for text, there's a workflow you might move through. You might have your notes program, whatever you're typing in, open. You might then switch to Safari, do some research, copy some text, etc. from there. Once you're kind of happy with your rough draft, you might put it in something like Pages, where you can typeset it a lot better and set it up the way that you want it. And then you might export it as a PDF, which can then go into something like the Adobe Reader app. So that's, sort of a workflow. So you've built up some text in whatever form that you want. You might then also want to do the image workflow, some images to go with your project that you're making. So you could use that image workflow we talked about. There's the audio that we talked about. Another one we didn't go through was video. Very much in the same way as you can go through with images, you can do a very similar thing with video. So take your video with the camera. Video Grade is a great app for, you may just want to tone down some of the colours or brighten up some areas. And it's quite a professional level app for doing that kind of stuff. If you then decide you're wanting a bit more of a narrative or a feel to it, 8mm or other apps like it will put sort of filters. If you're deciding you want it to be like a 1920s old-time black and white, you can do that. Or kind of a 70s faded colour. You've got all these kind of choices with how you want your film to look. You might be happy with it there, or you might even go into an app like Explain Everything, which then lets you talk over the top, write and draw on the screen while all the stuff that's in there is playing, and export it all as a video. And once you've done those single workflows, then your time to package it all together. And then this is where it gets really interesting. How can I package all those different bits together purely on my iPad using this workflow idea? Well, a presentation is a great way to fit all those things together, and Keynote which has recently been updated with some other new tools, is one I'd recommend for that presentation, but there are other apps as well. You might want to create an ebook. So your photos, your video, your text are all in an ebook, which you can then export to iBooks or somewhere else. So you've got that nice page turning and people still being able to experience all your videos together in that ebook form. That also, you can open in these files or use the plus button, which is a universal button in iOS. You see that plus for adding your photos or your other things in and embed them into Book Creator. You might want to pack your final package purely as a video. So you might use an app like iMovie where you can add titles over the top and you can add music, you can add extra narration, that sort of thing as well. So there's a few different ways you could think about. Once you've mastered these single workflows, you could think about now packaging them all together at the end there. There's also some totally new ways almost of putting this stuff together. So presentations, yeah, we're kind of used to that. Video files, yeah, we're kind of used to that. But as I said, the iPad is becoming a platform that can do things that, you know, the PC and that we could never really do in that zone. And Flowboard is an app which it's kind of part web page, part presentation, part sort of slideshow gallery in the way that it combines all these different stuff. And all that can be done again on the iPad, fairly simply and easily, just dragging with your finger all these different elements that you've created with the other workflows. So definitely would, that's one that I would recommend. Okay, so at least getting the idea for your project or your work, okay, I've got a series of apps and how I could put them together to be more productive with the iPad, get more out of it in that turn, and just take advantage of how it is different from the PC. I guess changing that mindset was really the message that I wanted to share with you guys today. Thank you for that. Cheers.